Hey, soccer fans, welcome back to the Feed the Fire podcast. I am your host, Nick, and we have a lot to talk about, recapping the Chicago Fire's victory, 3 straight road wins against Vancouver, and we're previewing their next match this upcoming Saturday at home, back in Soldier Field. Feels like forever. They are taking on a struggling CF Montreal, who has some coaching changes that we're going to get into a little bit as well. But first, I want to make sure I recognize our sponsor, Skira Icelandic Spring Water, available at your local 7-Eleven. Skira Icelandic Spring Water is some of the most pure, clear water that you can get, coming from a natural spring in a government-protected reserve in Iceland. Get out to your local 7-Eleven. The weather it's kind of starting to warm up, right? So start stocking up on your Skira, stay hydrated, and support our sponsor who supports this show and who has been from day one. Also, I got a few emails from people reaching out to say, hey, what's with the new schedule? You're still putting out regular episodes twice a week. You doing okay? And thank you to everyone who reached out, Israel, especially you as well. Yeah, just busy at work, guys. I'll pull back the curtain a little bit here on my personal life and let you know. So I do claims handling. I'm an adjuster. I'm a claims attorney, and we had, I would say that the client that I work for, our team lost about 75% of our employees to a competitor recently. So we have had to, in the last 6 weeks, rebuild an entire team, retrain an entire team, catch up on 6 weeks worth of work. And thankfully I was promoted as a result of this, taking over management of the team. So also there are management duties and meetings and reporting and planning for conferences and all that sort of thing. So yeah, it's been like 10 or 12-hour days for the last 4 to 6 weeks or so as we right the ship and kind of rebuild our team better than ever. But thankfully, it's paying off in a career move. It's paying off in a salary move. I'll say that, and it's paying off in responsibility and networking and all that sort of thing. So I'm very grateful for that. But yep, it's going to affect the hobbies. It's going to affect the podcast a little bit. So for those of you who reached out and just said, hey, haven't heard an episode in a while and haven't seen much on social media, I appreciate it. It's kind of odd to think you guys out there are enjoying it that much where you want to reach out to me, and I love that. So thank you for that. But yeah, just busy at work. That's all it is. Thank God that's all it is. I know there's a lot going on in the world for a lot of different people, so I'm happy to be this busy. Not complaining at all. But with that, now let's jump into our recap of the Chicago Fire versus Vancouver. And I want to ask and mull this over while you're listening to the episode. If you want to do some research and let me know, email me the answer here because I don't know it. GlassHouseSoccer@gmail.com or on social media at GlassHouseSoccer. Has an MLS club ever beaten all 3 Canadian MLS clubs in a single season? I want to assume that it has happened in the 30 years or so. Well, we didn't have all the clubs all 30 years, but I in the recent years where we've had all 3 clubs, has that happened where an American club has gone to Canada and beaten all 3 teams or has hosted and beat all 3 teams? Because the Fire are about to do it in 3 straight weeks without, knock on wood here, without jinxing it. They have beaten Toronto in Toronto, they've beaten Vancouver in Vancouver, and they are coming back home to take on Montreal. So I think that would be some wild trivia if the Fire were the first team to ever beat all 3 Canadian clubs in a single season. Someone send a message to Opta and let's see if they can figure that out for us. But speaking of trivia, with the Fire's recent run of form, loss, draw, 3 straight road wins, there's a lot of trivia that's come out of this. So here you can now impress all your Chicago Fire and MLS and soccer fans here with some of the trivia this week. This is the first time in 16 years since the 09 season that the Fire have won 3 road games in a row. And the record is 4 road games in a row back in 2008. Also, this is the first time in Fire history they have had a player on the team of the week, the MLS team of the week, 5 straight weeks. Week 1, Gutierrez. Week 2, Brady. Week 3, Kuipers. Week 4, Gutman. And last week against Vancouver, Zinkernagel with the goal and assist. Also last week, Berhalter was was the coach of the team of the week. And I think Kuipers was even featured on a bench, I want to say, in week 2, because he had a pretty good outing in that draw against DC. So, yeah, we've had players on the team of the week. It's wild to think. And also now you're starting to see the Chicago Fire move up in a lot of the pundits' power rankings and team rankings, getting them into the top 10 finally after, finally getting that third straight win. People are saying, okay, this is legit, and they're doing it without their main starting 11. Oh my goodness, what could the Fire be when the starting 11 are fully fit the way Berhalter envisioned it in this offseason? And that's the real question. And I'm not going to speculate on that now because we've got another 29 games to do that and actually see how it plays out. But kind of feels good to think about the positive possibilities, right? Also, other trivia, the Fire have scored 12 goals in their first 5 games of the season, which is the most ever in club history. And Hugo Kuiper's goal, I think it was 52 seconds into the match against Vancouver, was the 6th fastest goal in Fire history. They've scored 5 other goals in less than 52 seconds. And the record, actually, there's a tie. Jamar Beasley in 2001 and Damaduro in 2012 have the record for fastest goal in Chicago Fire history, 25 seconds into a match, each of them 11 years apart. So there is all this Chicago, winning makes history, right? It quite literally makes history, gives us this fun trivia to talk about. And let's see how they did it against Vancouver. And if we look at the goals, it was the first time the Fire were playing from the lead. Kuiper's getting that goal in the first minute. Now they give up the equalizer, not too long after. Rios equalizes in the 14th. But then in the second half, Zinkernagel takes over, gets a goal in the 62nd, and then it's Kwame adding that assurance late in the stoppage time in 90+5, getting his first minutes with the team and his first goal. So great to see that. Now, we're going to talk about, are we going to have Kwame starting in the midfield over Ortahel now? Is he going to come in for Gutierrez? Since Gutierrez was on international duty. Gutierrez was not on the bench for the Nations League third place match against Canada because of muscle discomfort, I think was the official report. So we'll see if that was just a way of saying, like, get me out of here early. Let me go back to my club team since we're playing in the third place match, or if there really is some sort of muscle issue that Gutierrez is experiencing. And, flying all over the country lately between club duty and country duty, that's going to put a strain on your muscles without a doubt. So hopefully that's all it is he was just trying to get back to Chicago a little early, and we can see him starting along Kwame. But don't be surprised if you do see a starting three of Kwame or Ortahel and then either Williams or Pineda. We're getting a little ahead of ourselves for that Montreal match. But Chicago then gets those 2 second-half goals, and that's a huge difference from last season. They are playing well to finish games. Now, how did the statistics look in this match against Vancouver? Chicago actually ceded possession. They only controlled 45% of the possession in this match. But then again, when you're up a goal away late, you are probably going to be a little bit more defensive. And Vancouver does like to counterattack. So the Fire were able to kind of weather some of that storm. The Fire ended up not a huge offensive output, but enough to get 3 goals, 9 shots, 5 on goal. And their defense blocked 3 shots. They had 439 total passes, so a little bit down. But again, you're playing a little bit more defensively on the road to the best team in the league by the record. And you're up a goal late in the second half. So I can live with that. And they passed at an 86% completion rating. So they are completing passes again. So when they had the ball, they were maintaining it. This wasn't just, long ball type of stuff or quick counterattack stuff or, defend and counter type of thing. So they were actually trying to do some stuff with the ball. They ended up winning 6 corners, put in 5 crosses, only 2 offsides, which is fine with me. If you get 2, 3, 4 a game, that's fine. You're stretching the back line. They did get outdueled in the air. They were outdueled 11-6. Now, I think part of that is having some different players. I think part of that is being a little bit more on the defensive side of things when you're at Vancouver, but to get the result, so I'm not going to nitpick this too much. They had an XG, expected goals of 2. Brady came up with 1 save. Defense had 7 clearances, committed 9 fouls, picking up 2 yellow cards, and no reds. So that is the statistical breakdown there. Vancouver did control. When Vancouver had the ball, they were controlling the match. They would hold it for long stretches of time if you look at kind of the interval possession ratings. And the second half was fairly even, and that really played into the Fire. They controlled the beginning of that first half, then it kind of evened out, and then when Vancouver started pressing for that goal and the Fire started making some of their defensive subs, that's when Vancouver started possessing the ball more, but not necessarily creating any more chances. It was nice to see Marin Haile Selassie get back in the game. Nice to see Carlos Terán get in the game and get some minutes there. Hopefully he is back to 100% against Montreal, because I'd love to see him back in that back line, starting next to Jack Elliott, learning his relationship with him a little bit better, how they want to play together, what their strengths are. And I think Montreal would be a good team to do that. Now, I don't want to get ahead of myself and say this is a surefire win, because we know how things can go in Major League Soccer, especially as Fire fans. I don't think we're over that hump of just not worrying or coming in neutral to it, with being indifferent towards your feelings just yet. But Montreal would be a kind of get right game if they needed it. And it would be a good game for Terán and Elliott to kind of establish themselves as a solid starting center back duo. So that was it against Vancouver. It does feel like it was so long ago, and I kind of love that, because we're ready for the next one. Fire fans, usually it's like, that was a terrible game. We blew it. We lost. Like, can we look forward to the next one? But you can't look forward to the next one with that sour taste in your mouth. But this one, it's like, cool, we beat Vancouver. Let's get back home and let's beat Montreal, and let's make sure we're, top 4 in the Eastern Conference by the end of match week 6. Like, that's the excitement. I feel like we're already into the Montreal match vibes back home, especially, first home game in about a month since the home opener against DC United, that frigid 20-degree night where my boys are like, we're staying to the end. I don't care how cold it is. We're staying to the end. God bless them. I guess I'm doing something right. And thankfully, none of them got sick that following week either. But it does feel like we've already moved into the Montreal zone. So that is where I want to turn our attention to now. Though there's a lot of good that we took from that Vancouver game, especially watching Orhel play those long balls over the top to Kuipers, seeing our defenders play some of those balls down into the channels or out to the wings, seeing Gutman get forward in the attack, seeing Barroso get forward in the attack and put the opposition wingers on their heels. That is where the Fire lost against Columbus. Columbus kept pushing their players forward. The Fire were not finishing well or threatening to the point where Columbus had to change their defensive structure. They said, it's fine, the Fire aren't going to score every opportunity, keep pushing our wingers forward, and eventually they won that battle. So it was the Fire, though, in this match against Vancouver, who kept pushing their players forward and imposing a little bit of that will on Vancouver. And so hopefully they can keep that going against Montreal. So let's turn to Montreal, because they've been making some news in all the wrong ways, resulting in their head coach, Laurent Courtois, former MLS player here, getting canned by the club. Now, according to the press release on Monday, it said CF Montreal have parted ways with head coach Laurent Courtois. The club announced assistant coach Marco Donadel became their interim head coach. No other changes have been made to the coaching staff. So Donadel, if I recall, does have a decent coaching history. He's played for a while. Let's see where I can pull up some stuff on him. He's been a manager at some level or other since 2019. Came up with the Fiorentina in Italy youth system. Was an assistant with their first team, an assistant with Spartak Moscow, was the head coach of, I'm going to butcher this one here, Società Sportiva Calcistica Ancona, more commonly referred to as Ancona, an Italian club, and then became an assistant coach in Montreal just this year. So he does have some coaching experience. He does have some playing experience in Italy, and actually played with Montreal for about 4 seasons from 2015 to 2018. So he's going to be comfortable. Will he be able to tweak the squad to get them to play better? Will the squad be playing better? Will they get that new coach, that interim coach bump? That remains to be determined, because Montreal is an interesting scenario, and I was chatting with some of my cohorts in our MLS fan media content creator group chat here. I'll have to remember the actual name of it sometime. And everyone was saying, look, we kind of expected Courtois to get fired. That's just kind of how Montreal operates, how ownership operates. And they usually don't let coaches go for a long time. They usually aren't going to spend a lot of money on players. But if they are citing Courtois' bad performance over the last year or two, then how can they blame him that much to the point where they're firing him 5 games into the season when they're not going out and signing different players? And we're going to look at their moves in the offseason. We'll see if you think that ownership was justified because Courtois is not getting the right results. The other side of that coin is, but you still own 4. You still lost 4 games, and I think they scored maybe 3 goals in that. We'll take a look at their form as well. But here the article on Courtois' firing continues. The decision comes roughly 14 months after he was hired, arriving in January 2024 after leading Columbus Crew's MLS Next Pro side to that league title in 2022. So we know Courtois is a decent coach, and he knows MLS. And I think he was, for his level of experience and style, I think MLS was a good start for him. Whether he ended up elsewhere or was kind of a North American lifer remained to be determined, but it's not going to be in Montreal. Let's see. Through 5 match days this season, Montreal are last in the overall league table. 0 wins, 4 losses, and 1 draw. They're amid a season-opening 7-game road swing before returning to Stade Saputo on April 12th versus Charlotte FC, and it's a tough matchup against Charlotte. So yeah, they're according to what I have been hearing from other MLS people who follow the league, who follow their clubs, who are putting out shows, who are creating content, who are engaging with pundits and fans and clubs. They have 7 games to start on the road. They don't spend a lot of money. They're known for turning over coaches. Is it any surprise that Courtois was fired? Maybe just that he was fired this early, and but otherwise probably not. But then, do you blame ownership? Do you blame management? Do you blame the coaching for an 0-4-1 record with very few goals scored? Either way, I guess the Fire are catching them at the right time. Maybe. All right, let's take a look now at the transfers and the roster movement from this offseason with Montreal and see if you agree that this should be more on ownership for not putting out a decent team or more on coaching for not getting the most out of their players here. So who did they lose? Goalkeeper Logan Ketterer was out of contract, and defenders Gabriel Corbo, Grayson Duty, Raheem Edwards, there's a name, Raheem Edwards, that we all know here, Fire fans, had their options declined, along with defender Robert Thorkelson and defender Joaquin Sosa. Sosa's loan expired. Also, defender Usman Jabeng was transferred to New Mexico United. So there goes a lot of defense. Midfielders, they lost a number of midfielders as well. Elias Iliadis, his option was declined. Fortunately for my Greek brother, he landed at a club in Bulgaria, so he's still playing. Lassi Lapalainen had his option declined. Matteo Schiavone, option declined. Victor Wanyama, out of contract, now playing for a club in South Africa. Rita Zuhir, option declined. Alessandro Biello, loaned to Halifax Wanderers. And Michael Adedokun on loan to Lexington SC. Offense. What offense did they lose? Joseph Martinez, option declined. He's with San Jose now. What other striker? Matthias Kokoro. Remember him from netting 2 goals against the Fire last season. He is on loan to Atlas FC in Liga MX, south of the border here. So even from north of the border to south of the border. But you can see that I don't think the front office of Montreal really valued their players that much. Now, I'm not doing deep dives into their scouting reports or their statistical numbers or anything like that, or how they've played, but considering they're loaning and transferring guys out to New Mexico United, Lexington FC, Halifax Wanderers, in the Canadian Premier League, like these leagues are several steps below where MLS is, and it's clear that they didn't value their players very much, or a guy they relied on like Wanyama goes to South Africa. Iliadis, who is supposed to be a guy they were developing and a guy who maybe they wanted to be a centerpiece for them in the future. Nope, they sent him off, or he ended up getting signed in Bulgaria at only 23 years old. So he still had a career ahead of him. Montreal didn't see it. Or maybe they just didn't want to pay him. And let's think about that for players on the way in, because they bring in Jalen Neal in a trade from the Galaxy, defender. They bring in 3 other defenders on free contracts, and defender Alexander Gubolo is a homegrown. So they replace all their defenders here with cheap replacements. The new defenders, Dante Seeley, Luca Petrasso, Brandon Craig on free transfers, and like I said, Alexander Gubolo, a homegrown product. In the midfield, they bring in Victor Laturi from Ross County FC. Is that somewhere in England, or is that somewhere in the U.S. in a lower division? Nope, it is in the Scottish Premiership. They are towards the bottom of the table in Scotland, Ross County FC. They bring in midfielder Hennady Sinchik on transfer from Metalist Kharkiv, which is a club in the Ukrainian First League. What other midfielder do they bring in? Michael Edidokun from the Super Draft, and free agent Fabian Herbers, everybody, in Montreal. So maybe they have a thing where they always have to have a former Fire player on the roster, or maybe they really are just trying to put a cheap team out there and run that out and see what they can make off of it. Who knows? But they definitely were not swinging for the fences, to use the baseball term, this season. Now, strikers, they brought in Giacomo Vroni in a trade from New England Revolution. Again, a guy who never lived up to his potential in New England, or maybe did so for half a season and then kind of tailed a little bit. And so they were able to get him on a little bit of a bargain. They get Prince Owusu on a free transfer. And Prince Owusu is a name that we know if you've been following MLS the last several years. He, again, currently with CF Montreal just this year, but for the last 2 seasons had been with TFC. 28-year-old striker, came up in German second division. He was actually born in Wertheim am Main in Germany, but came over in 2023 to TFC. So a guy who never got his legs under him or his scoring streak under him at Toronto, ends up coming to Montreal on a free transfer. They also were able to grab Owen Graham-Roche, a forward, on a homegrown deal, and goalkeeper Emil Gazdov on a transfer from Canadian Premier League team Pacific FC. So there's really no stars on this team. And they didn't go out and spend money or even try to spend money. The biggest signing, it looks like, is Jalen Neal and Giacomo Vrioni, guys from within the league. Guys who didn't really play that well last year either. So I really do think, looking at the way the players have come in and out over this past offseason for Montreal, the cheapskate ownership narrative definitely holds up in that sense. Now, comparing Chicago to Montreal, just kind of head-to-head, historically in MLS, Chicago's won 9 games, Montreal's won 13, and they've had 7 draws. But over the last 3 games, Montreal won 2-0 last September. The Fire won 4-3 earlier in March, that Windy City Miracle. And then in 2023, they played to a 0-0 draw. So that's a little bit of the history there between the 2 clubs. Now, how is Montreal going to line up? We talked about them not having any stars or any really great players this season. And in fact, they've only scored 2 goals in their opening match against Atlanta. That's it. Their last 4 matches, they have been shut out. Thankfully, they were able to shut out DC and get their only point on the year. But they really don't have offense, which makes me feel a lot better about things. In their last match, a 3-0 loss at Nashville, they lined up in a 3-5-2 formation. They had in goal Jonathan Serra, and across the back, left to right, Fernando Alvarez, Luca Petrasso, and George Campbell. Now, who did they have in their midfield? Left to right again, Dante Seeley, Bryce Duke, Nathan Saliba, Victor Laturi, and Alexander Gubolo. Their strikers, Caden Clark and Prince Owusu. So that was their starting lineup, the 3-5-2. As an MLSer, I like Bryce Duke. He has bounced around. I think he just needs some stability and a defined role in his young career still. If you remember, he came over from Miami. He is how old? Only 24 right now. So if he can get some stability over the next couple, 3 seasons, or get to a team that can offer him some stability, have a coach say, look, this is your role. Just do this really well. And then halfway through the season, we're going to put more on your plate. We're going to put more on your plate. And then by the time he's 26, 27, hopefully peak physical fitness, he'll be in peak playing fitness. But I doubt he's going to get those chances in Montreal. And he seemed like a good piece that Miami could have probably built around. But as we know, they were going for Messi, Suarez, Busquets, Alba, all those guys. And even before that, Higuain, Matuidi, they were going for the big guys. So Duke was considered expendable at the cost of bringing them in. Now, Caden Clark, again, another really interesting young American player here who probably should be playing a lot better than he is. I think, he's only 21 years old, but still we haven't seen him have that huge breakout where he's going to be a star in MLS and get that big transfer and stay in Europe. I know he was picked up by Red Bulls. Was it Salzburg or was it Leipzig? I forget. And then came back to MLS on loan. So I don't know if he's still on loan. I haven't looked up his contract status, but that's a guy who could be very dangerous, who the Fire are going to have to mark. However, not living up to the hype, which I think, sidebar here, and this will kind of tie into some of the USMNT conversation that's going on. We do like to overhype our young stars to the point where we're disappointed when they're not immediate successes or beating Panama or winning World Cups in 2022. So I think we as an American fan base need to kind of back off a little bit. But I also think, yeah, we need to have certain expectations and high expectations for some of these guys who have the talent and the drive and the opportunity. But then the next piece that comes in is the coaching and the development. And yeah, Clark is an okay player at the MLS level, but he needs the coaching and he needs the development and guidance. And the fact that he's bounced around from San Jose to Minnesota to overseas Red Bulls to Montreal probably isn't doing much for him as a 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old. But hopefully, and this is me as an American soccer fan, he can find some stability, find some good guidance, mentorship. He's not getting it on this Montreal roster. Forget the coaching situation. There is no senior striker out there that can take him under his wing and kind of show him the ropes and kind of be that dual strike up top with the young, speedy, talented guy and kind of the old dog who knows where to be at all times, fox in the box, if you will. Nope, he's getting none of that in Montreal. So that is going to be a tough spot for him. Hopefully he can get a move to a more stable spot. But yeah, Montreal, that was their starting lineup. They bring in off the bench Sunisi Ibrahim. They bring in Kwadwo Opoko. They bring in Brandon Craig, and they bring in Samuel Piet. Now, that's another name we all know as American soccer fans from facing off against Sam Piet and the Canadian national team. So Piet is a very, very good player. He may be the star on this team. He is an excellent defensive midfielder and knows when to pick his time going forward and playing balls forward. So the Fire, I think, have a very simple task in this game. When Piet's on the pitch, don't let him influence the game. We have excellent, excellent wingers. We can play around him. We have excellent midfielders in Gutierrez and Kwame, who hopefully can do some little 1-2 link up. And even with Kuipers, if Kuipers does one of those moves where he drops deep and we see Zinkernagel and Bamba push forward, then they can play right through him, potentially. And if they do that, then that'll expose that 3-man backline, assuming that the new head coach for Montreal, the interim head coach, wants to continue with a 3-man back line. Usually we see in the interim coaches trying to get back to basics. They'll drop back to a 4-man back line or on a defensive shape, let's do a 5-man back line and then send the wingers forward. But their primary responsibility is to defend. And you know what? We're going to try to win games 1-0. So it wouldn't surprise me to see the tactics change to get back to basics, to just try to pick up a point, especially on the road, I should say. So if that's the case, I like the Fire's chances. I like seeing Zinkernagel, Bamba, Kuipers, Gutman, Barroso, Kwame, Gutierrez being able to have the ball and create chances for each other through possession, since they know how to do that now. They have a coach who knows how to teach them, and they have talent to be able to do that. So if Montreal wants to sit back and get back to basics and just kind of defend and counter and play for a draw on the road, I think that's going to favor the Fire. If they want to go toe-to-toe, I think that's going to favor the Fire. If Montreal can get a lucky early goal, if the Fire come out flat, being at home for the first time in 4 weeks, which they shouldn't be, but you know how things can go on occasion. They're in a groove on the road, and now they got to come back home. There can be that rallying cry. We're on the road. We got to pick it up a little bit, and you feel a little more comfortable at home. Hopefully that's not the case. I think Berhalter knows how to get this team up for matches. But if Montreal can get that early goal and sit back and drop 10, 11 men behind the ball, it could be a long day for the Chicago Fire. But I think that's the only way Montreal comes out of here with a point. I don't see the Fire doing any worse than a draw at home against Montreal. That would have to be a Montreal early goal. So that's what we're looking at there. So who are the top players to watch? I kind of told you a little bit about it right now. Again, nobody's scoring for Montreal. Prince Owusu and Nathan Saliba have the only 2 goals for the club. Owusu's got also an assist, and George Campbell also has an assist. Oh, there's an MLS name for you, who at one point was thought to be a USMNT defender. But George Campbell also with the other assists. Now, if you want to look at passing accuracy, it's really not good to do on the MLSsoccer.com website, because you get a guy who comes in off the bench for 2 minutes, completes 1 pass, and technically he's got 100% passing accuracy here. But I'm trying to see who's playing out of the minutes. There's really no one who jumps out of the pages, one of these great passers. It's actually Joel Waterman, who has the highest passing completion percentage, along with George Campbell. So those are your 2 guys who look to be just playing the ball back and forth around the back line. So I don't think that there's really much of a good link-up play moving forward for Montreal. Anything we should be worried about on the attack? There is nothing. I'm looking at this roster. I'm looking at these stats, and yeah, it's only through 5 games, guys, but there's really nothing that is looking at all threatening here. The highest expected goals on their team is Owusu. He's got 2.24 expected goals. So they're definitely underperforming their XG. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think they've got about 7 or 8 XG on the season. But again, the Fire have 12 actual goals. So that is nothing to worry about, it seems like. Here, looking at the goalkeeping statistics, Sarah, not a good passing percentage, not a good long ball percentage, not many saves. Let's see, 9 goals, 26 saves. Not very good. So all of these things seem to suggest that the Chicago Fire are going to walk away with like a 3-0 victory. Let's hope they're up for it. They get their 2 or 3 quick goals in the first half, or go into the half up 2-0 and don't take their foot off the pedal, because that's the only way I see this happening. Either Montreal gets lucky early and defends like the Dickens, or the Fire end up getting lazy and making some mistakes and giving Montreal a way back into this game. But I'm going to stick with that prediction. I think the way the Fire are playing right now, and the way Montreal is playing right now, with the consistency of the Fire, the turmoil in Montreal's locker room, I'm going to give the Fire a 3. Yeah, I'll give them 3-0. I was thinking maybe Berhalter makes a bunch of subs in like the 75th minute, empties the bench, and Montreal somehow grabs one at the end there. But no, I'm going to give the Fire their first, or I should say, my first predicted clean slate of the year, 3-0 at home over Montreal. I won't be at the game, unfortunately. We rolled over our tickets so I could bring the whole family to another match later on in the season. So for those of you who are going, enjoy the match, have a lot of fun, cheer on the Fire. Let's bring this historic road win streak to continue. Let's bring it to continue. Yeah, I'm mixing my words here. You guys can tell I've been working 10, 12-hour days, right? On legal files and insurance files. Yeah, absolutely. Let's continue this historic streak. Let's bring it to its high point, and we will see how the Fire sit as the rest of the games fall out over the weekend. Okay, with that, I want to thank you all for tuning in, for listening on whatever podcast you're listening to, whatever provider, watching on YouTube, following along on social media. Remember, rate, review, like, subscribe, share the show, bring more people into the conversation. Ryan, Israel, Tom, I still owe you guys responses to your emails. I haven't forgotten. I just am exhausted. By the way, add 3 kids into the mix when you're working 10, 12-hour days on legal files. So I thank you guys for your patience. I thank everyone for checking in. And as always, let's go fire.